Goblin launch detected.
This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game features some lovely people with Mika, Kevin, and Maximus back. Mika is playing his Verazol deck, the Split Current, keeping Rhystic Study, Sublime Epiphany, Mystic Snake, Kadama's Reach, Thornwood Falls, Soul Ring, and an island. Kevin is playing his Zara Renegade Recruiter deck again, keeping a mountain, 2 islands, Cascade Bluffs, Narset's Reversal, Negate, and a Thought Vessel. I just can't get enough of Shorikai, keeping Heart of Kirin, Island, Shimmer Dragon, Skycloud Expanse, Swords to Plowshares, Unlicensed Hearse, and Tezzeret the Seeker. Always up to no good, Maximus is playing his Xyris the Writhing Storm deck, and he strangely enough has promised that this isn't a wheel deck. He keeps Bolt Bend, Skullwinder, Pendant of Prosperity, 2 mountains, an island, and a forest. Maximus wins the die roll and starts us off. Maximus draws, plays a forest, and passes. Mika's got an island for turn, and casts Soul Ring. Kevin plays an island, passing. I go for the hat trick, playing my own island, and pass. Maximus draws, plays a mountain, and passes. Mika casts a Rhystic Study in his main phase, and then plays a tap Thornwood Falls, gaining a life. After that, he passes. Kevin draws, plays another island, and passes. I play a Skycloud Expanse, and cast an Esper Sentinel, paying the 1 to the study, and passing after that. Maximus draws, and plays an island. He casts a Pendant of Prosperity, not paying the 1 to the study, and as it enters, gives it to Kevin. He passes after that. Mika draws, and plays a Rogue's Passage. He then plays Tatyova, and passes. During his end step, Kevin activates the pendant so that he and Max can draw a card and put a land into play. Kevin draws and plays a mountain. He then casts his own Soul Ring, but doesn't pay either of the 1s and allows Mika and I to draw. He then plays a Thought Vessel and pays the 1 for the study. With nothing else, he passes. I draw and play a tap Boreal Shelf. I then play an Unlicensed Hearse, not paying the 1 to the study trigger, and pass. Maximus has a Cinder Glade for turn, which comes in untapped. He then casts his commander Xyris, and doesn't pay the 1, and passes. Mika draws and plays a forest, gaining a life and drawing a card from Tatyova. Maximus gets a snake token from the Xyris trigger, and Mika's ready to give him even more snakes with the Kadama's Reach, but Kevin responds by casting Narset's Reversal to bounce it back to Mika's hand and copy it. Mika then recasts his Kadama's Reach while Kevin's resolving his copy, and draws another 1 and gains another 1. As a result, Maximus gets 3 snake tokens in total and passes. Kevin draws and plays a mountain. He then casts a Phyrexian Metamorph and has it come in as a copy of the Esper Sentinel. He follows up with a Tectonic Giant, and after that, passes. During his end step, I activate the Unlicensed Hearth to exile Narset's Reversal in Kevin's graveyard, and we then move to my turn. I draw and play a Hollowed Fountain, taking 2 so it comes in untapped. I then cast a Cultivator's Caravan and pass to Maximus. Maximus draws and plays a Game Preserve. He pays none of the 1s on the board, and everyone else gets to draw a card, and Xyris sees this, making Maximus 3 snake tokens. He follows up with a Springbloom Druid, and then sacrifices a land and finds 2 basics to put to the field tapped. He then goes to combat, and Kevin volunteers to get hit by Xyris. They both then draw 3 cards, with Maximus making more snake tokens, and he passes after that. Mika draws and plays a Temple of the False God. He then plays out an Illusionist Bracers, and then a Sunken Hope, and passes to Kevin. Kevin bounces his Phyrexian Metamorph on his upkeep and draws. He plays a Reliquary Tower, and then goes to combat. He swings a Tectonic Giant at Mika. He picks the mode to have everyone take 3 off the trigger, and Mika declares no blocks, taking another 3. In Kevin's post-combat main phase, he activates the Pendant, which allows him and Maximus to draw a card. He then plays out Zara and passes. I bounce my Esper Sentinel on my upkeep, and then draw for turn. I play an Island, and then replay the Sentinel, as well as an Unsettled Mariner. I pass after that. Max's games preserve triggers on his upkeep, and we all reveal our top cards, with only Mika and Kevin revealing creatures, so nothing happens. Max then loses a snake token as it gets bounced away, and draws a card. Going to combat, he swings a snake apiece at us, in apparently a sign of good faith, and I take the hit, while Kevin and Mika block. In his post-combat main phase, Max plays an Old Growth Dryad, and with the trigger on the stack, Kevin casts Runaway Together on it and Tatiova. Each of us gets a basic land, and Maximus then replays the Dryad so we all get another one. After he plays that, he then casts a Collective Voyage and puts 4 mana into the spell. Nobody else decides to pay into it, so we all go and find 4 basics. Going to combat, Kevin opts to take Xyris damage again, and I respond by casting Swords to Plowshares on it. Max's commander gets exiled, and he gains some life, and no one gains any cards or snake tokens. With all that done, Maximus passes, and on his end step, Mika casts a Growth Spiral, drawing a card and putting a land into play from it. Mika draws and plays a Forest. He then casts Verazol for 4 counters, and after his commander resolves, follows up with a Territorial Allosaurus kicked, and removes 2 counters to copy it. 1 copy fights Zara, and the other fights the Unsettled Mariner after Mika pays the 1. He passes after that. Kevin bounces the Tectonic Giant on his upkeep, and draws. He plays a Sulphur Falls, and then casts Telepathy, and I just hate this card. I respond by playing an Arcane Denial, but Kevin counters my counter with a Negate, and we all have to play with our hands face up. The boards get a bit messy as we try and make it work, and he then recasts the Tectonic Giant, and then sacrifices it to play a Flawless Forgery with Causality. He targets Mika's Precog Perception and my Swords to Plowshares, and I respond by exiling my swords with the Hearse. Kevin then resolves what he can, scrying 3 and drawing 3 and passing after that. I once more bounce my Esper Sentinel and draw. I then cast Urza, Prince of Krug, and then follow up the legendary Planeswalker with a Shimmer Dragon and pass. Game preserve triggers on Max's upkeep, and none of us reveal a creature. He bounces a snake back to hand, and then recasts his commander. He then plays out a Girapur Orrery, and goes to combat. He swings 3 snakes at Mika, and 2 at me. Mika blocks all 3, while I take the 2. After that, he passes, and on his end step, Mika casts Broken Wings and targets Telepathy, but Kevin responds by countering it with a counterspell. Mika bounces the Allosaurus on his upkeep, and then draws. He plays 2 lands, and then casts Jace, Mirror Mage, and kicks it to copy it with Verazol. This has him getting 3 Jaces in total, and he upticks all of them to scry 2 3 times, bottoming all 6 cards. Going to combat, he then swings the Allosaurus at Maximus, who blocks the snake token, and after that, he passes. Kevin draws and recasts his Phyrexian Metamorph as a copy of Max's Xyris. He then plays out a Mirror Box, not paying for the Sentinel or the Rhystic Study trigger, and he gets to make some snakes as well as we draw the cards. Mika then responds by countering it with a Frilled Mystic, and once that's resolved, Kevin then moves to cast a Sculpting Steel and has it come in as a copy of the Pendant of Prosperity, and this time Kevin gives his copy to Max. Kevin then casts a Replication Technique, copying the pendant twice and choosing Max to copy his pendant. This is getting very confusing. Kevin then activates the 2 pendants so they each draw 2 and get to put 2 lands into play. After that, he passes, I tap my Esper Sentinel and the Caravan to draw a card from the Shimmer Dragon, and then exile 2 cards from Kevin's graveyard by activating the hearse. I bounce my Sentinel and draw. I then play an Inventor's Fair before casting a Dermotaxi. It enters and exiles a Tectonic Giant from Kevin's graveyard. I then replay the Esper Sentinel and cast Kotori as well. Going to combat, I crew up the Caravan and the hearse, giving the hearse Kotori's trigger. I swing the Shimmer Dragon and the original Jace and the Caravan and hearse at Kevin. Kevin chumps with 2 snake tokens, and the original Jace dies, while I gain 7 off of lifelink. I pass after that. Maximus's Games Preserved reveals no creatures off the top, and he has to bounce a snake token, and then draws for turn. He casts a Bedlam, not paying for any of the taxes, so he gets to make more snakes. He then casts a Sylvan Offering, choosing Kevin to make a bunch of 1/1s and a 7/7. Going to combat, he swings 15 points of damage at me and 15 points of damage at Mika, which we can't block. I also take 3 Xyris damage as well, so Max and I each draw 3 cards. Maximus and Kevin get some snake tokens, and he then plays a mountain in his second main phase, before passing turn. During his end step, Mika activates the Alchemist's Refuge to flash an Urban Evolution and gets to draw 3 cards. Mika bounces the Frilled Mystic and draws. He then plays Verazol again, who comes in with 4 counters, and he goes to combat. He swings the Allosaurus copy at Maximus for 5, which can't be blocked, and he takes the hit. In his post-combat main phase, Mika upticks Jace to Scry 2, and then activates the Token Jace's 0 ability and reveals an Incubation Incongruity off of it. And Mika then casts a Slin Voda Kicked, making a copy with Verazol. This bounces everything except for the Verazol and Xyris's, and he then passes turn. Kevin bounces his Xyris and draws. He then plays an Emberwild Captain, becoming the Monarch. He then plays out Cackling Counterpart, copying the Captain, and then replays the Metamorph as another Captain. After that, he passes, and during his end step, I exile 2 cards from Mika's graveyard and crack the Inventor's Fair to go and find a Cyberdrive Awakener and put to hand. I draw and replay Kotori, Esper Sentinel, and then Urza. I then crew up all of my vehicles with them, and swing all 3 of them at Mika. He responds by casting a Kicked into the Royal, and copies it with Verazol, bouncing my Dermotaxi and the Unlicensed Hearths. I still get my Dermotaxi/Tectonic Giant trigger, and everyone takes 3 from it, and then Mika takes the hit for 7 from the rest of the creatures. At the end of combat, Max untaps my Caravan by using Maze of Ith. I then recast the hearse and the Dermotaxi, which as it enters, exiles Zagana Utopian Speaker, and I pass after that. Game Preserve once more reveals no creatures, and Maximus bounces a snake before drawing for turn. He casts a Wild Evocation, and then goes to combat. He swings Xyris and 9 snakes at Mika, with each of them drawing 3. This has Maximus making some more snake tokens, and he passes after that. Mika reveals an Incubation Druid from Wild Evocation, casting it for free, and then draws for turn. He gets to play 2 forests, and then casts a Doubling Season, and then Verazol, which has his commander coming in with 12 counters. Mika then plays the Cragplate Baloth Kicked, copying it with Verazol to make a copy. This has 3 Baloths coming in with 8 +1/+1 counters each, and Mika goes to combat. He swings the Baloths at me to take me out, and passes after that. Kevin reveals a Conjurer's Closet from the Wild Evocation, casting it for free and drawing for turn. He plays a Mirror Pool, and Maximus activates his Pendants of Prosperity to draw him more cards and Kevin more cards as well. Going to combat, Kevin swings 1 Captain at Mika to take him out and the other 2 at Maximus, who takes the 8. Kevin then activates his pendants to make Maximus draw, and passes, drawing from being the monarch at the end of turn. Maximus's Game Preserve doesn't reveal all creatures, so nothing comes into play. Wild Evocation then flips Bolt Bend for him, which does nothing, and he draws for turn. He Chaos Warps one of the captains, and this has Kevin revealing a mountain off the top and putting it into play. He then replays the Old Growth Dryad, and Kevin declines to search because he knows that Maximus has a treacherous terrain in his hand. As we move to the combat step, Kevin flashes back Cackling Counterpart on his Emberwild captain. Maximus then declares no attacks as he's got a full hand, and he moves to his post-combat main phase. He casts a Treacherous Terrain, and after it resolves, Kevin's at 10 life, and Maximus then passes. During his end step, Kevin casts Thrill of Possibilities. Kevin reveals a talisman from the Wild Invocation, and casts it, and then draws. He goes straight to combat, swinging his captains at Maximus again, who ends up casting a Fog to stop the damage. Maximus also casts Jaheira's Respite to get 3 basics, and after that, Kevin moves to a second main phase. He casts a Faithless Looting, and then follows it up with a Clever Impersonator for another Emberwild captain. He then kicks a Rite of Replication for another 5 Emberwild captains. With a literal wall of captains, Kevin then draws from being the monarch and passes. Maximus's Game Preserve whiffs, and Wild Evocation casts an Emberwild Djinn. He then draws and plays a Mosswarp Bridge which comes in tapped. Maximus then casts a Nessian Boar, followed by an Assault Suit, and then a Skullwinder. Maximus takes Chaos Warp, while Kevin takes Runaway Together. Maximus then suits up the Boar and Chaos Warps his own Bedlam, flipping a Molten Primordial into play. This lets him steal an Emberwild captain, and he then moves to combat. This has Kevin responding by activating his pendants in response to increase Maximus's hand size by forcing him to draw cards. With 8 captains and now 3 cards in hand, Maximus still can't attack. He then passes to his second main phase, casting a Soul Ring and then a Caves of Chaos Adventurer, taking the initiative to go and grab a basic and then plays it before passing turn. Kevin reveals a Glasses of Urza off the Wild Evocation, casting it and drawing. He then plays a Mindclaw Shaman to cast Max's Praetor's Council. Kevin then plays a Flawless Forgery to cast Max's Treacherous Terrain, and with exactly 24 lands into play, Max dies instantly as the spell resolves. Game review time. So, Maximus's Xyris deck was kind of a Gruul group hug deck. He would typically only attack with his commander when it benefited the other player for drawing cards, otherwise he just had a bunch of land ramping effects and then would hopefully kill his opponents with Treacherous Terrain. It was fun to see a kicker themed deck, with Verazol's being the one that I've seen the least amount, and typically I see the Gruul one that pings people in the face more often. I liked Mika's sub-theme of basically having Krakens, and it was very thematically sea creature based. Kevin's Zara deck is usually more aggressive and he tends to use her a lot more than this game happened. I think it was pretty cool to see him win off the Emberwild captain's back, basically not allowing Maximus attack him because he had so many of them. Shorikai continues to be a lot of fun for me, and unfortunately I kept a pretty slow hand. I had 2 2-costing vehicles, but with no ramp and no way to get Shorikai out quickly, I quickly fell behind in terms of card advantage and mana that my opponents gained. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.